Speak the charm of me, charm of me, charm of me, charm of me.
There will come a time on the planet Earth when science and technology will be long forgotten, when wizards will rule the world.
This is the Arnemancy Podcast. The world is weirder than we know. Join your host, Reverend Eric, and his diverse array of amazing guests in an exploration of tarot, magic, the occult, and the history of Western esotericism. The Arnemancy Podcast exists thanks to the support of generous listeners like you. Please consider supporting this podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Arnemancy. Welcome back to the Arnemancy Podcast. This is the episode that you have all been waiting for. Part 1 of the 2022 Year Ahead Forecast.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Yay. I am your host and timekeeper and referee, Reverend Eric. And I am joined by my amazing friends, astrologer Andrew B. Watt and cartomancer T. Susan Chang.
Good to be with you, Eric, as always.
Glad to be here. It's nice to be back.
It's lovely to see your faces, and I'm happy that we're doing this again, and I'm also happy that you were agreeable to this new experimental recording format, which hopefully will not explode. So, Andrew, would you please introduce yourself just in case there are, listeners who have been under a rock or listeners who have come from some far-off land to hear us?
I'm Andrew B. Watt. My website is andrewbwatt.com. Pretty easy. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew B. Watt, and you can find me on Instagram and other platforms at abwatt or abwatt42. I think that's it. I've been on 2 of these episodes so far. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad that your listeners are joining us.
They've been kind of the most popular episodes of the podcast. I always kind of figured it's because Susie's here, and Susie's like
Aw.
like really famous compared to us, but
The rose between 2 thorns.
yeah.
Oh, man, guys. Making me cry.
Susie, would you please introduce yourself now? Like, just,
Okay, yeah, so...
tell the 3 listeners who don't know you.
I'm T. Susan Chang. I specialize in tarot. Let's see. Most of everything I do is probably easiest to find at tsusanchang.com. Let's see. I am the co-host of Fortune's Wheelhouse, which is now in retirement. It's finished, but you can still get it out there on all the podcast services. I write books on tarot, including Tarot Correspondences, which is basically modern day Tarot 777, and my book on the Minor Arcana, 36 Secrets, etc., etc. I've got a new one coming out next year, which is my online tarot course between hardcovers. So, but the tarot course you can get to through the website too. The only other thing I should mention is my Etsy site, which is etsy.com/shop/tarotista, where you can buy all kinds of cool stuff, like cases for tarot decks and perfumes and talismans. I've got some talismans on there now. 8 of Wands. So I think that's good enough.
Ooh, I have
We're
one of
finding
those.
your luggage at all times and in all places.
That's right.
It makes sure that your luggage gets to where you're going way before you do.
Unless you're carrying a keychain with the talisman on it too.
Then only your pants arrive.
Always looking on the bright side, aren't we?
It's
Oh my
been
God.
that kind of year. It has been that kind of
It
year.
has.
The 3 of us have conspired to offer a 20% off any of our divination services if you book before the last day of 12th night, which is January 5th. You can find links to our respective services on our web pages and in the show notes. And when you get there, use the code BIGASTRO22 and you will get 20% off. And even though the code seems to indicate that these are astrological services, I will warn you that only Andrew offers astrological services. Susie and I will just do cards.
I remembered that we set this offer up last year, so I just created the code, and now both of you are stuck using my code. But Susie came up with a brilliant code for 2023, and
you can't
we
reveal
look
it yet.
forward. We look forward to telling you about it next year.
Yes. So here's how this is going to go. We're going to we have a lot of divination to get through. So we're going to start off discussing sort of the chart for the year, the solar return chart for the year. We're going to pull a card for the year, and then once we get into the months, every month you guys will have about 10 minutes to talk about it. And when we hit the end, I will ring a bell like this.
Oh,
bell,
that's a sweet
right.
sound.
Yes, that's the bell of astral doom. Okay, so let's start off. Andrew, what's going on? What is this solar return chart? I'm going to act like I've never seen one before.
So the idea behind a solar return chart is that we are taking the time that the year begins, which in this particular case at midnight for the meridian of Springfield, Massachusetts, which both Susie and I live on, the sun will be at 10 degrees of Capricorn, 44 minutes. So we are using that as the key for the remainder of the year. So every single month of the year, we're generating a new chart where the sign changes, but the degrees and minutes don't. This leads to a couple of different things. The first of them, as Susie pointed out in our pre-discussion, is that the ascendant is always going to be in Libra. Regardless of where you are in the world, when midnight reaches you, the ascendant is going to be in Libra. And this makes Venus the queen of the year. And she will be queen of the year for as long as our civil calendar starts at midnight on January 1st. How long that will be, I don't know, but that will always be true. I think that this is really nice. Let me finish this thought. I think this is really nice because it means that we're always starting in a place of feeling love and connection and beauty and hope for the coming year. That's what we all want.
That seems to sort of reflect our, at least in the West, our tradition of like kissing somebody at midnight, right?
That's right.
Right,
That's
absolutely.
right, yes.
Yeah. But also, I was wondering, like, so we have the precession of the equinoxes, which might shift our January 1st a little bit. And we also have like leap years. When we have leap years, I suppose we might only be off by like a full degree at that point, huh? Does it kind of like build up, and then snap back?
It does kind of do that. If I advance my calendar program, even as far as, say, 2040, I notice that the years get a little bit wonky. And, 20 years from now, the nominal first day of the year after 20 years, 40 years from now till 2041, suddenly it feels like it's December 26th instead of January 1st. So it does get a little wonky pretty rapidly.
I hope we have all managed to retire by then and that a new generation, like perhaps our sidekicks, do we get sidekicks? Our sidekicks will have taken over the forecast episodes by then.
You'll have to start working on cultivating an apprentice, Eric.
Sounds terrifying.
Oh. Baby Wonder Wizard.
I thought I was just going to be Susie's apprentice.
Well.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I interrupted you with some horrible jokes, Andrew. And
that's quite all right. That's why people tune in. They tune in
That's
for the
right.
bad puns, the terrible jokes, and occasionally the divination. So we all know that, for example, the Queen of England is not supposed to intervene in politics all that much. She's head of state, and we know that she and her courtiers do all sorts of machinations behind the scenes, but officially she stays out of politics. It's the same with Venus, right? She's queen of the year, but she's sovereign, and she can't let her hands get dirty. So she always has an advisor. Now, Venus can never be more than 2 signs from the sun. That means that she can be in Scorpio, she can be in Sagittarius or Pisces, or she can be in Capricorn and Aquarius. And that sign's ruler is thus either Mars or Jupiter or Saturn. And that's much more like the day-to-day reality of having a prime minister, right? Somebody who knows how to get their hands dirty. And it gives us a basic theme of either austerity, if Saturn is the ruler, or it gives us Jupiter, which is generosity, or it gives us Mars, which is conflict and stubbornness and a lot of ambition and aggressiveness on display. And I've tested this against a number of previous years that we can, judge with a fair bit of certainty, like, say, 1941, and this works reasonably well. So I'm reasonably sure that we can trust this technique moving into the future.
It's funny, those three, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, they kind of fit pretty well with like the Wheel of Fortune card, wouldn't you say, Susie? Like you've got your aggressive side, you've got things going well, and then you got things kind of tightening down.
You're ascending and you're descending and you're on top of the wheel. Precisely. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Jupiter being at the top and then flanked by those attempting
the
to
malefics.
Yes, flanked by the malefics. Does feel like that.
So then who do we got as our prime minister this year, Andrew?
Well, for the chart for midnight, for, as I said, the longitude of Springfield, Massachusetts, we have got Saturn as our prime minister. So it's a year in which austerity is going to be one of the key themes. And one of the things that I say, surprise, one of the things that I think is relevant here is that Saturn kind of reminds us of the importance of nature, and nature always bats last, as the phrase goes. So in years in which Saturn rules, things have a tendency to be kind of dry, kind of cold, but also kind of austere or limited, and we tend to experience declines or limitations or obstacles as pretty serious conditions.
We just made it through 2021, which was a rough year. 2022, I suppose we're probably all ready to tighten our belts already a little bit. We've been getting warned about all sorts of things.
And last year it was Jupiter who was not Saturn. So get ready for fun times next year. Yeah, Jupiter, because Venus was in Sag.
Now, I think, what we're going to do is we're going to get the card of the year, and then we will talk about January itself. Is that what we do?
Let's do that.
Okay, let's do the card of the year.
All right, so let us have a look. Oh, look, it's the Strength card. Wow. So that's really interesting. One thing that I've I did a sort of a rundown of results from last year, and I've decided to refine the way I interpret the cards that we draw. So I'm going to assume that they refer broadly to topics that may arise rather than like how great we may feel or how terrible we may feel, which also sometimes, there's a mood to the card. But with the Strength card, I would expect the emphasis to be physical strength. So literally health, well-being, and our ability to do what we need to do in this world, which is not surprising since we're all coping with whatever, Greek letter of the coronavirus variant we're on. So I think that strength will be the topic, and primarily the health, the biological health of the planet, and those living on it.
I think that makes a lot of sense because we also have a lot of like climate crisis crap to deal with.
Yes.
So the biological health,
global warming could also be the strength.
So below. Yeah. Oofta.
And somebody pointed out once that the Strength card literally looks like a woman feeding her cat medicine after they've been to the vet, right? So this is forcing the feral or the animalistic powers to take their medicine, even if they don't want to.
Right.
That's right. Yes. She's literally holding his mouth, the mouth of the lion. So there could be a message about masking.
Kind of rubbing his throat a little bit, being like, "Come on, kitty, you can do it."
Yeah. So, and the fact, I also think that it's fair to say this is a worldwide phenomenon because of the infinity sign on top. Broadly applicable to everyone in all times.
I'd agree.
Susie, Susie, when we get into the rest of the cards, are you going to be taking these cards out as you draw
No.
them, or are you going to be
I'm
shuffling
gonna
it back in?
redraw.
So we could
Yep.
we could just do strength every month. That would
We could do that. That would be interesting, like your all tower card deck that you have.
We could. I don't know that I could survive giving my cat that many pills, but let's get into the chart for January. So Andrew, you've already run through the ruler of the year being Venus, and the prime minister being Saturn. So what's going on specifically in January that we should be prepared for?
So the first thing that we should be aware of is that Venus and Pluto are having a conjunction, and this conjunction is going to repeat 3 times. We're just sort of coming up on the retrograde conjunction. We had a direct conjunction just about a week ago, or even not even that. I think it was like the 12th. So it's just a couple of days past. And the third one doesn't take place until March. So Venus and Pluto combinations are about this lovely idea of being together and having a great time with somebody, and the other person being really domineering and controlling. So the queen here is not really in control of herself, and that's not a great place to start. Saturn, as our prime minister, is in the decan called Heaven and Earth. So the prime minister has this really big utopian ideal that they want to achieve, but the reality is that utopias involve practical extremism. So we're not starting out with a great relationship. The third thing is that I have also selected a monthly governor, and this is a planet we didn't talk about much last year, but it's whichever planet rules the midheaven. And the midheaven in this case is in Cancer, so the first month is going to run fast because it's being ruled by the moon. And that creates some rapid changes right at the beginning of the year.
So we don't really get to ease into the next year. We got to kind of like start off at a gallop.
Yeah, I think that there is going to be quite a bit of a gallop, especially since Mars and the moon have just had a conjunction right after, right a little just before January 1st. So the moon is going to be rushing. They've just had this militant meeting and is going to be pretty aggressive to get things done.
Well, heck, Susie, cheer us up with a really good card for the month.
Let's see what it is. Oh my God.
Is it strength?
It is.
Strength.
Yeah, so I guess, what happens in January applies to the entire year. I think it's just where we are right now in December. You can look ahead to January and that it's going to be all about boosters and all about, there's this new pill that they're antiviral that they're trying,
the Pfizer pill, right.
Yeah. So that's good. I mean, last year we had the Ace of Wands in January, and I was really excited and stoked about that. And then we had, the January 6th events. And, I think the way to read the Ace of Wands would have really been to recognize that it was an overflow of energy, an insurrectionary energy. So, we can't assume that the strength card will be all good news, that merely highlights the area that we're going to deal with. The other thing is that I noticed a high correlation last year between the elemental correspondences of the card and the natural disasters that went with them. So we may be talking about something fiery. Literally, if you look at the actual news headlines for a year, every month is disaster month. So we can't really say that one's worse than the others. But if there's going to be disasters, they will be related to fire.
Okay. Well,
did I cheer you up?
So everybody keep not totally. I would just sort of
Australia.
Everybody keep like a bucket of sand ready.
Well, that's actually a really good point because it is fire season in Australia. And that is something to watch out for.
The other thing about that Ace of Wands card is that we had in January of last year, as opposed to strength for this year, is that the Ace of Wands is about improvised weaponry, as opposed to a dedicated killing tool like a sword. And so one of the ways for us to think about this is that strength is in part about mind over matter. So there is this idea of a mind war, like somebody is trying to control physical conditions on the ground by changing hearts and minds. So that
That's
becomes a
interesting.
possible
Yeah.
theme for this January.
Yes,
yeah,
and
I also like to think
Mhm.
of.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I like to think of the strength card a lot as being representative of the virtue of fortitude. So there's a lot of like endurance, like
That's right.
get
It can be
ready
physical
to
or
last.
mental or emotional fortitude. That's
Right,
right.
right.
Yeah. And in fact, sometimes it's considered courage, just courage. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Okay, are we ready for February? You had one more thing, Susie. I think I interrupted you.
No. I was
don't
just
know.
going to talk about the, the various forms of strength and its aspects in terms of force, fortitude, moral force, and physical force. But, I think we can move on from that.
There's a whole Fortune's Wheelhouse episode about that.
Yeah, if you want to hear lots about that, you can listen to the whole hour on Fortune's Wheelhouse.
The links to each card will be in the show notes. Actually, I don't want to
boy.
commit Eric to that, but
This is where this is where my apprentice will come in. He'll be okay, so on to February. So February this year starts on the 30th of January.
right, because that's the time at which the sun is going to be at 10 degrees 44 minutes. But this time it'll be in Aquarius rather than in Capricorn. So that's how this solar return, lunar return chart process goes.
Okay.
So Venus will be retrograde. So the Queen is reviewing past actions and trying to sort out what her relationship is apart from Pluto. But at the moment, she's keeping company with Mars and with the Moon and with Mercury and with Pluto. So the Queen is having a party. All these senior dignitaries are there. She's got her expert in the room. She's got billionaires in the room. She's got mothers and medical personnel. It's just a big conference call. But she is reviewing what has happened in the past and trying to make better decisions for the future. Saturn and the Sun are headed towards their annual conjunction, and this is usually when harsh news gets delivered. It usually happens, it can happen anywhere in the chart. It just so happens this is the sign opposite the Sun. So this is where the Sun is at his weakest and where Saturn is at his strongest. So the sun is going to get some bad news here, and Saturn is going to wind up holding the winning hand.
Not
Saturn
to mention
is-
also that Mars is exalted and the moon's in fall.
Yeah.
Moon is in detriment.
Yeah, Moon is in detriment.
Mhm.
I think it's important to point out that Mars is going to pass through Capricorn, hit Pluto, which is this expansionary power, and then it's going to hit Saturn again in Aquarius. Now, Saturn has moved on from Aquarius, but this combination of Mars hitting Pluto, hitting Saturn, is exactly the thing in the 2020 episode that I said to Eric, God, that looks an awful lot like plague. I don't want to say it, but that's kind of what it's supposed to represent.
I mean, your average plague lasts like 4 or 5 years or something like that. And I know we're all eager to get it over with, but yeah, we might have a couple more years left.
I don't want to say that, but
Yeah, I know, but
But, yeah. Well, would you rather know or not? That's what we...
I'd rather know.
what
I'd rather
divination's
know. I
for.
think it's
I'd rather
important.
know. That's why
Yeah.
we do this, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Saturn also winds up being our monthly governor. So Saturn not only gets to give the news, but also give a lot of bad news and slow everything down. If you've got projects, I would I would hold off. If you have New Year's resolutions, you might consider waiting until March to start your year.
Well, that makes some things a little easier.
Yeah, it could be more
all right,
global
what
supply chain blues.
I know.
Oh.
All right, Susie, give us a card. Give us a happy card.
All right,
Give us
shall we
one
try
with,
for
like-
something that's not strength this time?
Yeah, give us like
Please.
some cups or
Please.
something.
Oh, okay. 4 of Wands. Voila. So that's nice.
Ooh.
So
I
4
like
of
that.
Wands, yeah, that's a particularly cheerful one, at least on the face of it. I mean, it is the card that's known as the Lord of Completion. It does tend to denote celebrations. So, one thing that we might hear about is like celebrity wedding or something like that. That could come up with this card. Or it could be an easing of restrictions during this month briefly. It could be. We could experience that. The other things that this card, tends to bring up is temporary situations. So we could see ceasefires, for example. We could see truces. We could see another thing that it has to do is celebrations and festivals. So it's possible that celebrations and festivals may be in the news, not necessarily for good reasons, right? It's just a topic.
Oh, yeah.
It could be that, who knows, like, for example, that concert where everybody, where there was that crush of people rushing the stage. That's the kind of thing that could happen because it is a card that simply indicates the presence of people rejoicing.
Yeah.
It doesn't say whether that ends well or not.
I mean, there
But,
are a couple of big celebrations in February, anyhow, right? There doesn't the Chinese New Year usually happens in February?
It can. It can be end of January, beginning of February. Yeah.
Okay, and then also, isn't Mardi Gras in February? As a non-Catholic, I cannot recall these things.
We have 2 dates to look up.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
okay, somebody send those to our intern.
What about
Send
your
them to the
daimonic
apprentice.
servitor?
Wait, don't you have to pay an apprentice? I think interns are free.
It's actually March 1 next year, Mardi Gras.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
but it's
okay.
right around that time usually.
All right. Thanks, Susie. I'm
Yep.
glad that at least one of us is a good Catholic.
No, I'm a good Googler, is what I am.
Oh.
The other thing that this card sort of points out is that you have a 2-tiered system, right? You have people on the ground who are celebrating, but you also have people who are in the high castle. Like, that's the basic plot of the Decameron, is that all of the wealthy people continue to hide out in their fortresses. And meanwhile, everybody on the ground is like, well, the pandemic is basically over, so we can come out and celebrate, right? And that's the point where the people in the castle wind up getting sick. Oh no, that's Edgar Allan Poe. That's Mask of the Red Death.
But that's also, you were talking about Saturn bringing harsh news, and that could be, it could be that the celebration presages something.
It could also be a rescue operation. Somebody,
It could be.
people are in a difficult situation and helpers come and try and alleviate it, or there's a dramatic story of a last minute rescue of that sort.
Oh, that's a good point. Like the kids in the cave, or the soccer
That's
team
what I was thinking
in the cave
of. Yeah.
in Thailand a few years ago. But this time it's a rescue off a mountaintop, maybe.
Could be.
Oh.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but the first thing that comes to mind for me always with this is like a temporary cessation of hostilities. So we'll see if that comes to pass.
Let's hope. That sounds nice.
That does sound nice.
Okay. Are we ready for March?
Yeah, let's do March.
Sure.
Okay,
You haven't rung the bell once, so presumably we're keeping on schedule.
So far we've done pretty good. The intro was long, but I feel like we're making up time. We're doing a good job. These episodes always run long anyhow. Okay, March. tell us where we're starting and what's going on, Mr. Andrew.
Venus is in Capricorn at the moment, and she's below the horizon. So there's this sense of people wanting to connect. In a judicial chart, a chart for a nation, any planet that's in the first house speaks to something that the regular, ordinary people want. Saturn is in, I have it in my notes here as Capricorn, but it's not. It's in Aquarius. It's in the last decan of Aquarius, which is called the knot, where it's keeping company with the moon. And this placement is about untangling or disentangling.
Hang on, Andrew. Isn't that it looks like Saturn's at 18 degrees. That would be
You're
Decan
right.
2,
It's still
it?
still in heaven and earth. It's still in Decan 2.
But the moon is in the knot.
Yes. So the moon is in the knot, and Mercury and Saturn are in heaven and earth, the second decan. And this is a warning not to spend too much money this month. It is a great time for you to consult with your tax advisor and get some new advice about that sort of thing. The presence of the moon says check in with your psychic advisors, your tarotista or your tarotist, your cartomancer or your astrologer about the year ahead.
So in your notes for this month, you talk about Venus besieging Mars.
Yes.
What is that an astrological term?
Yeah, it's an astrological term. So we have Pluto on the one hand and Venus on the other, and right in between them.
Oh.
Venus is at 25, Mars is at 26, and Pluto is at 27 of Capricorn. And this is a besieging position. So Mars wants to act in a very martial way, wants to cause trouble, and Venus and Pluto are restraining or controlling Mars from doing that. So there's a number of ways to interpret this, right? Venus is a visible planet. It's a ruler of the solar system. But I think of the invisible planets, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, as being much more like strong influencers. They don't have any legal authority. They don't have any titles, but they have the kind of influence. And Pluto is sort of about the madness of crowds. Everybody discovers that buying from Amazon.com is easy and cheap. And so Amazon immediately grows to be this amazing, huge company, and Jeff Bezos becomes a billionaire. That's the kind of...
And he gets to fly a penis into space.
I wasn't going to say that. But this looks a whole lot like the visible leaders of a movement and the money men restraining the martial impulses of the general populace. Like this, that's what this kind of combination would mean in a national chart. The restraint or the limitation of a potentially violent outbreak. Now, this is the sort of thing that,
positive.
Yeah, it is. It's the sort of thing that you don't see, right? If it doesn't happen, then it's successful and the chart correctly predicted it.
All right.
Right. Yes, in fact, maybe we should just forecast all good news and then we'll be right, because there will be no record of it in the news.
Susie, what do we got on the tarot side of things? Are we going to pull
Okay.
strength again?
Let's see, this is March. I've got the Page of Swords, which is interesting
right.
because, as I recall, we got the Page of Swords last year as well. And I was quite interested. It wasn't for March, though. It was for June. And the results that we got last year during the month of June was that it turned out that there was a lot of sort of churn in sort of small countries and new governments. So, so Page of Swords is that kind of like just starting out in the regime, trying to make something happen. Very often the first start of any new government in any country is faltering and stuttering, as the Page of Swords does. There's a great deal of sort of infrastructural flailing about, which we see in the Page of Swords as well. So perhaps we'll see something like that again. We'll see. The other thing that I can imagine it being, if not government reorganization, could be something in the legal system, sort of a wrangling of policy behind the scenes, but not quite getting there. So,
Oofda. Well,
yeah.
that sounds kind of terrifying too. I mean, we've got some legal
have
system
some
issues that are
yes.
going to be coming up here in the United States, like some big ones.
We do.
But also,
We do.
I immediately was sort of thinking of the kinds of challenges that, like, the new prime minister or the new chancellor of Germany,
New chancellor of Germany,
imagine following on the heels of Angela Merkel after what she's been in there for like 16 years.
There's some
maybe
big
in March we'll
shoes,
start
big
to
sensible
see how
shoes
he's
to
doing.
fill.
Very, very sensible shoes.
Very sensible shoes.
So yeah, and the other thing is that the Page of Swords, I wouldn't be surprised. This is not something that came up last year, but it could be also school related, education related, like debates in school boards across the country, like we've been seeing a lot this year. It's that kind of like somewhat fractious, interminably debated controversies at local levels. That could also be very Page of Swords.
That makes sense. We do have a conjunction on March 28th of the Moon, Venus, and Saturn, sort of at the very end of the month, which I think is worth paying attention to. That's your creative instincts, your gut wisdom, and your lived wisdom of the number of years of experience on the planet that you've accumulated. And so if your instincts are telling you something at the end of March, you should probably believe that. Lean into whatever it is that you feel like those three parts of yourself tell you should be doing.
Okay. I will pay attention to that because that will be, 3 weeks after my delayed New Year's resolutions start.
Right, exactly.
Okay, are you guys ready for April?
Yeah,
We're making
let's look
really
at
good time.
April.
You guys see
Yeah,
this?
we're
This is an
booking
excellent
along.
time. Let's
Yeah.
see. Oh man, if only the year would pass this quickly. Well, I don't know if I want that to happen.
Yeah, I don't think you want that to happen.
I would like it to pass at a normal pace and not the extra slow pace that years have been seeming to take. I was promised that as I got older, years would pass more quickly.
Are they?
They were up until like 2020.
Well, that's to be expected. I think all of us are feeling that way.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. In fact, somebody asked me what year of school my son was in, and I just got it totally wrong because I just thought that year didn't happen. I mean, it was like, he's actually a junior, and I'm like, no, he's definitely a sophomore.
We feel that way about
Totally
my
wrong.
stepdaughter sometimes. She does something amazing and brilliant, and we say, how can you do that? You're 4. You can't even read yet.
Yeah, exactly.
She's 28, by the way. It's not like...
Oh, that's funny.
So the chart for April actually occurs on the 31st of March at 7:35 a.m. And Venus and Mars are now besieging Saturn. So Mars is at 18 degrees, Saturn is at 21 degrees of Aquarius, and Venus is at 24 degrees. So Saturn is the prime minister of the month, or the prime minister of the year, and the monthly governor for this month, but trapped between what I called the peace-loving Secretary of State, that's the Venus side of it, and the bomb them all and let God sort it out activity of Mars. So
that is an interesting besiegement.
it's a very interesting besiegement. So this looks a whole lot like a high-level, very forceful intervention of some kind. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the United States, but it suggests a fairly strong takeover of something, or the sweeping away of the norms that have been established by somebody who's a little bit too attached to austerity.
This is kind of an interesting thing to be having happen on the tail of the Page of Swords from last month. We might be seeing some sort of upset that goes that takes a couple months to settle down.
Right. It's also worth noting this is where the Saturn-Mars conjunction finishes up, right? Venus is going to move on into Pisces where she's exalted, but Mars is sweeping right up towards Saturn, and that conjunction is going to happen pretty soon. So this is that potential for plague sort of finishing up and coming to whatever outbreak we're going to see.
Wait, hold on. You think that the outbreak will be during this part, and so the plague isn't finishing yet. It's
no, I don't think it's finishing. I think that this is the point where it sort of takes off.
Oh, that's not very exciting.
It's not.
Or it's the wrong kind of exciting, I guess.
Part of the reason why that may happen is something that's happening in Pisces at about the same time, which is that we've got a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction occurring in Pisces. Now, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces, and this is the first time in several years that Jupiter has been in a sign that it rules. And it, in general, this is a very favorable combination. But Jupiter is about rulership and good leadership, and Neptune is about people just not obeying the rules. And so a conjunction like this is for your own good, where we are imposing these rules on you for your own good, and people going, "You're not my dad. I don't have to listen to you." So this is not a great combination to have in the middle of a plague. I don't know quite how this is going to play out, but this is traditionally unfavorable.
Well, the other thing, though, is that, through most of April, you're going to be having both Jupiter and Venus in signs where they do well. We're going to have Venus in exalted in Pisces and Jupiter dignified in Pisces. So there should be some good vibes, regardless of how realistic they are.
Right. I think that there will be some good vibes and we will feel great. The thing about this, though, is with Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter next door with Venus in Pisces, you've got a set of solutions, which is awesome. That's the Jupiter and Venus in Pisces. And you have a significant problem. That's Saturn and Mars in Aquarius. And the solution to one problem doesn't match this other big problem. So we have the solving of one big problem, but we also have a continuing problem that isn't being solved. So we have two things that are sort of out of alignment. It's not to say that we won't be happy that the solved problem is solved. We're just also not going to be entirely happy because there's another big unsolved problem in the room at the same time.
God, it's like, oh man, it's like life is a TV show.
It kind of is.
Well, I see some really fantastic escapism there.
We might get some really good movies out of this.
We might get some really good drugs out of this.
Or some really good drama out of this.
Maybe all three, you guys. They don't have to be exclusive.
All three. That's true.
Well, okay, Susie, give us a card.
All right, let's have a look at what I've got here. Oh, it's the Wheel of Fortune. Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that points to our buddy Big J, Jupiter. And interestingly enough, we got this last year in February. Yeah. So one of the things that happened last year in February was that a Porsche broke the land speed record for cars.
So do you think that's going to happen again? Are we going to get a new land speed record?
I just thought it was a charming manifestation of the wheel literally turning really fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be like, maybe it will be something really literal. Maybe electric cars will suddenly be super cheap, or maybe all electric cars will explode.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I think the Wheel of Fortune, another thing that happened last year was that the power grid broke in Texas, so power being a Wheel of Fortune kind of keyword and Texas being the biggest. So, that's the sort of thing that can happen. Very big things that affect a lot of people, can happen with the Wheel of Fortune. Also, meetings between heads of state because it's Jupiter.
Okay.
So this was the big Biden-Xi summit in February of last year. So I would expect geopolitics to be in the news more than usual. I would expect, we might see some massive moves in the market. It might be a big month for volatility, for example. That's the sort of thing that could happen with the Wheel of Fortune. Let's see. And I think that heads of state generally will be in the news. Like, for example, the impeachment trial was all the news in February last year. So I would look to our heads of government.
Right.
I would look to our big money systems. I would look to things that have wheels.
That's a great one. Relevant to that, in this chart for the 31st of March, covering all of April, Jupiter is in the 11th, and I hadn't really thought about that, but Jupiter takes his joy in the 11th. And this is really about alliances, acquaintances, friends, building networks. And so, I'm alarmed by this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be that this is some kind of a grand bargain about making sure that the whole world gets vaccinated, because we know that that's really the only thing that's going to actually solve the COVID crisis, is some kind of a grand medical bargain. And that may be what's on offer here.
Maybe so.
Be...
I can imagine this having to do with large worldwide organizations like the WHO or the UN, or things that have broad planetary governance.
And that fits really nicely with the 11th house, which is more about non-governmental agencies than governments and bureaucracies.
April sounds like it's going to be kind of interesting. Maybe it'll be the most interesting month of the year.
I'm actually looking forward to it.
That totally... I made a very useless sentence, but I'm sticking with it.
That Wheel of Fortune there raises my hopes for April.
Let's hope.
Same here.
Let's hope. Yeah.
Let's head on into a little bit more uncertainty. Let's go to May.
So I think this looks really good. We have a chart for the 30th of April, 2022, 10:54 p.m. That makes Venus the ruler of the year, Saturn our prime minister, and then Venus is the governor of the month, right? And
nice.
And that means that she's exalted in Pisces at the beginning of the month, suggesting that we're going to have a fairly favorable month. I like that, first of all. All of the planets in this chart are below the horizon, suggesting that personal and local economic matters are going to be much more important than what's going on in the wider world. So
even Mercury looks. Oh no, Mercury's below the horizon.
It's below the descendant. Yep, this whole sign has yeah.
So I think we're going to see a month in which being at home is important, but also reconnecting with family, sorting out any economic issues that your household has, figuring out your daily habits and whatever the new regime is in May are all going to be really important. You will benefit at this time from making your house pretty. Even if you can't spend any money, doing a really thorough spring cleaning in late April, early May is likely to be very favorable. We have this weird combination happening in Pisces. We have Mars at 12, we have Neptune at 24, we have Jupiter at 28, and we have Venus at 28. So this April 30th is actually the day of the Venus-Jupiter conjunction.
Wow.
And those are always really nice.
Yeah, that's I love that
That's
day.
auspicious.
Are you seeing
It is.
Yeah. Is there a good election on that day, do you think, Andrew? Oh, it looks like the moon doesn't have a really good it's maybe not bad.
It's not bad, but I think that the presence of Mars in the same sign with Venus and Jupiter means that this is
Not
not a
ideal.
day you want to be making a talisman.
Okay.
You don't want to make anything permanent, but doing some special devotional work to Jupiter and Venus, I think would go over fine.
Nice.
That sounds like a day for people to keep in mind. And, I mean, it is Walpurgisnacht, which is a great witch celebration day anyhow. So hopefully that'll be fun for folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I should say one other thing, and that is that the last decan of Pisces is called the Cup of Blood in this system that Austin Coppock developed in his book 36 Faces. And it's always been associated with medicine. So here you've got this planet that represents creativity and innovation. That's Venus. And then you have Jupiter for leadership. And then you have the influence and the sort of dispersal of power that is represented by Neptune. And pretty soon they're going to be joined by Mars, all in the Cup of Blood. So this is, again, like the moonshot effort to figure out medicine, but it can also lead to a lot of disinformation and misinformation. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. We're not going to know what this means until we're there, whether it's disinformation or whether it's a new solution to the current problem.
Interesting. And the Decan ruler for is Mars, in fact, for Pisces 3, who's right there in the sign.
So he'll
with
get
them.
there,
Mm-hmm.
and he will be getting to Jupiter and receiving instructions from the boss of the sign.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's Mars being managed by Jupiter, but Jupiter saying, here's the broad policy goals. Mars, go out and do it. And Mars going, this is what's going to go down, damn it.
Okay, I think it's time for a card.
All
It's
right.
time for a card.
Let's
Susie.
see. What do we got? Ha! Ace of Wands. Okay. So,
Oh, shit.
yes.
That's not good.
Yes. So, well, I mean, the thing about humanity is that, what's good for one person is usually bad for somebody else because we're like that. We're antagonistic. So, I would expect tempers to be running high, or libido to be running high in the Jungian sense, a high amount of emotional investment in everything. People's drives getting the better of them. So, as I mentioned, we've seen the Ace of Wands last year in January, and of course the big news was the storming of the Capitol. But you know what else happened that is another aspect of the Ace of Wands back then was that whole GameStop phenomenon, which is sort of this like rapid inflation,
yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That
So,
excitement about driving the stock, sky high based on, nothing substantial. So where we saw the beginning of the rise of the non-fungible token, which might be another thing that, the Ace of Wands might represent.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, if you're looking at like the because you had a financial sort of interpretation about volatility and stuff with the Wheel of Fortune in the previous month. So it could be that maybe you should be buying lots of stock and
Possibly
and weird gifts of monkeys in April so you can sell them in May.
There was a very deliberate story with that GameStop business about deliberately hurting hedge funds, and there was at least one hedge fund that went out of business. So we spoke just a bit about how wands represent improvised weaponry, and there was a desire to weaponize the stock market against the big inside players. It turns out that the big inside players still made a lot of money, but a lot of them didn't, and there was at least one hedge fund that went out of business. So
that's right.
There's definitely something to that idea that this is an improvised weapon to use against the experts or the so-called know-it-alls.
There is a rude strength to this card. Yeah. And
I love that phrase.
Isn't it great? I think
Rude strength.
there's
I'm writing it down.
like a not knowing when to quit kind of a thing. Too much is never enough with the Ace of Wands. So one other thing that I saw last time was overdoses, unfortunately. So,
Oh, yes.
yeah. So, Ace of Wands is something to be aware of, just the amount of sort of personal inflation that might be going on. In fact, inflation generally might be an issue. Financial
That's true.
inflation as well.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we have been warned that might be hitting us soon.
Mm-hmm.
The Ace of Wands, or the energy in the Ace of Wands, like, I usually don't see it as a bad card when I'm giving a reading, but it is sort of a card that has too much energy for its own good. It's like this is the overflowing of power,
That's right.
the shattering of the spheres and that sort of thing is associated with the Ace of
I
Wands.
would not be surprised if there were, also some eruption of some kind, whether it's volcanic or earthquakes or something like that, just because of the
or boils.
or boils.
Remember, kids, boil your lances before you lance your boils.
Now that's rude
nice.
strength for you.
That's rude strength, yes.
Ooh. Are we ready?
We're not.
Close?
April 30th is also the day of our first eclipse of the year, and it happens in Taurus, which in this particular case is in the 6th house. And that means that it is going to be the sort of thing that affects the working classes. Like traditionally, there's stuff happening in the 6th house is working classes, miners, the rank and file of the military, those sorts of things. And we have, at the same time that this eclipse is happening, we have the sun and moon, because it's a solar eclipse. And we also have Uranus, and they're practically all on top of one another between 10 and 14 degrees. So there's a sense of this particular eclipse as causing more upheaval because it's going to be amplified by that Uranian energy. And it's also happening on the North Node, so it's also got that more of this. So I would say that this is unionization. This is ongoing forcefulness from the working classes to push for better working conditions. Like all of that sort of stuff takes time, but it is likely to yield results.
Those sorts of movements have been gaining a lot of foothold this year, which just makes me so happy. First with the what do they call it? The Great Resignation,
Right?
And then like the rise of like the anti-work movement on Reddit and stuff, like, and unions happening. People talking about unions more and more, and people actually like doing it. That would be amazingly good news.
And this comes back to Susie's point about winners and losers. It is a good thing that wages rise in the United States and worldwide because we have not adequately calculated the cost of labor in our goods and services for decades. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have inflationary pressures that go along with it, because companies will raise prices in accord with how much additional money they have to pay labor.
Right.
That's a good
Wage gap. Yep. So this eclipse should be one that I guess of the three of us, Eric, you'll be feeling because you're the one with the sun in a fixed sign. So you have that to look forward to. Yeah, you're in Scorpio, right?
Okay, well, I will look forward to this eclipse. I'm going to party my ass off on Walpurgisnacht this year.
Excellent.
You guys are both invited if the pandemic allows us to travel.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Now, on to June. Oh, I probably should have rung the bell. Hold on, let me do that just to emphasize that it can happen. We've been making amazing time, and now we are on the last month of part 1. We're coming into June. Andrew, get us started on June. Let's hear how it's going.
Venus is in Taurus, so she's in a sign that she rules. Like the sovereign of the year is happy. She's going to be dispensing wealth and blessings and shooting off confetti from confetti cannons and children will be handing her flowers and everything will be great. She's in the first decan, which is the plow. So if you're going to have a garden, you want to make sure that it's in by the time she gets to Taurus on June 1st. She's actually in Taurus a little bit later than that, like the 30th of May, something like that, 29th. Saturn is our prime minister, and he is in the 12th house, and he's conjunct the sign of fortune, or the lot of fortune, in that last decan of Aquarius, the knot. So untangling things. Just as Jupiter takes his joy in the 11th, Saturn takes his joy in the 12th, and this is the sign that is associated with hospitals and hospices and emergency clinics. I do not like seeing Saturn in the 12th house.
I don't like this either. How come Saturn always oscillates between being kind of weird and kind of crappy?
Because something has to be in astrology.
That's right. Something has to be.
I guess so.
Jupiter is the monthly governor, and he is in Aries, and he is coming up on a conjunction with Mars. I forget whether they actually meet or not, but before Jupiter was telling Mars how to behave, now Mars is telling Jupiter how to behave. It doesn't seem fair to me, really, that we finally get a year with Jupiter in Pisces, and he's only there for like the first 5 months of the year. It's just not nice. And
yeah.
Wait, what happens? Does he go retrograde again?
He does
And
go
slip out of
retrograde
it?
later in the year and drops back into Pisces, but he sort of spends 5 months in Pisces and 5 months in Aries, and then 2 months in Pisces again, something like that.
It's not enough. It's just not enough.
It's not enough.
Do we get any good Jupiter elections out of his little Pisces toe dip?
That we do get some, and I think it's probably worth a separate episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
just to answer your question, I'm just doing a little Astro Gold animation here. There will be no conjunction of Jupiter and Mars because Mars is not going to retrograde. No. Mm-hmm.
Terrific.
Not
I like
in June
hearing that.
anyway.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready for the card then,
Yeah,
Andrew?
let's have a look. All right. Oh, it's the 9 of Wands. Okay. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
the Lord of Strength. So, by the way, I hope somebody's writing down these cards because I haven't been.
I'm writing him down. Don't worry.
Fantastic. You're a
I
champ.
mean, my apprentice is writing
Your
him down.
your
in the
demonic
background.
servitor.
Yes.
His
So,
apprentice. We've already determined that.
So the 9 of Wands is an interesting one. I mean, it looks in Rider-Waite-Smith. It does look a bit defensive and clenched, I guess we could say. But
Yeah.
You know-
I mean, isn't the 9 of Wands looking a little beat up?
he is. He's got sort of that bandage over his head.
Yeah.
There's.
It's been a rough ride
It's been a rough ride.
through the
So so that's something that we might experience. It is fiery, and I think that that's something to look out for during that month. Things relating to fire. Now that we have a 9-month fire season in this country, unfortunately.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen
No,
again.
I know. Or maybe, maybe we'll kind of get a grip on cultural burning finally and start, actually learning to control this thing. But in general, the 9 of Wands, it has that feeling of, it could have to do with uprisings, with long-standing conflicts kind of coming to a head, because it is a 9, and it is this rather this card of people exerting their strength. So I would be looking at global conflict during this period and trying to see where things look like they're going to kind of come to a head and require some kind of intervention. So Could it be something more neutral or positive? I suppose. I would not be surprised if there was some kind of very public athletic event that came into prominence for some reason, or some athlete who perhaps, either got injured or did something that, catapulted them into the news.
I forget whether 2022 is going to be an Olympic summer year or an Olympic winter year. Ever since they went to Olympics every 2 years, I just find that I never know
It's
whether
winter,
it's
I
a summer
think.
year or a winter year. But
Didn't the Tokyo one just happen?
yes.
Was that
Tokyo just happened?
I guess
Yeah,
it was
and
summer
that was
2020,
in summer.
So
that
this
was
will
in
be the
that was when the whole Simone Biles thing happened. Yeah.
right? And then now, isn't there a thing where China is supposed to do the next one, and the U.S. is like, we're not sending any diplomats?
Yes,
to that sort of
yes,
stuff?
that's right. We're sending our athletes, but not our diplomats. Right.
I feel like the first half of the year, it has some ups and downs. It doesn't necessarily. Okay, so first of all, this is Andrew and I have been doing this for 3 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and the first time we did it, I did the tarot cards, and I was super optimistic every time I pulled a card, and I was so wrong about so much stuff. I mean, the cards were kind of right, and I was just resisting.
Well, the thing is
reading
that,
way.
maybe all the things that you forecast optimistically happened. It's just they don't make the news, because if it bleeds, it leads.
That's true. That's true. And I feel like, last year we were a little we were a little pessimistic going into it. I feel like this year, I feel the pessimism. Like, there's been the last 2 years have been so hairy globally.
I was thinking about that, and I feel like it's worth having a little bit of a reflection before we close out episode or part 1 of this 2-parter.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that the last 2 years have told us how relatively peaceful and calm the previous 50 years have been. Like,
That's a good
that's
point.
A good point.
All of us on this call grew up in an age of relative peace and relative stability, at least for where we lived. And a lot of the rest of the world had trouble. And now we've seen with our own eyes what it is like to live in a place that's not quite as stable, and where the norms that we grew up with are no longer quote unquote normal. It's hard to think about this, but in a sense, we are being taught what it is like to live in a place without norms.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and the divinations are sort of giving us a foretaste of what it is like to live in a world where norms are not obeyed. I don't like it much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got its challenges. That's for damn sure.
It's got challenges, but it seems to me that a lot of the challenges come from not listening to one another and not learning how to compromise. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in the charts and a lot of the cards are sort of pointing to forceful decisions where I say, I'm right and you're wrong. We haven't gotten a single cup. We haven't gotten a single coin.
That's true.
That's true.
There's some stuff here about issues that haven't been addressed, and the cards that represent compromise are not the ones that are coming up.
As a matter of fact, we've gotten mostly wands. We've gotten mostly wands, people acting on impulse,
Yeah, and the only compromise-ish card at all has been that 4 of Wands. Everything else has been about, like, showing strength or fighting or having big change or it's been I guess what we can do is we can hope that the second half of the year shows some calming of the tempers and a little bit more.
We can hope.
We can hope.
We can hope. Join us on the next time on the Arnemancy Show.
Yes, which brings me to thank you everybody for joining us for part 1 of our 2022 forecast. Part 2 is coming up shortly. You can find Susie at tsusanchang.com. You can find Andrew at andrewbwatt.com. And you cannot find me at ericlarneson.com, but you can find me at arnemancy.com. We're also all on Twitter and Instagram and all those sorts of things. And remember, there's our code BIGASTRO22 to get 20% off a divination reading. if you book one before January 5th. And okay, so adieu.
Adieu. Thanks
Till
so much.
later, all. Thank
Till
you so
Till
much.
later. This has been another episode of the Arnemancy Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I have been your host, Reverend Eric. You can find Arnemancy online at arnemancy.com, and you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the Arnemancy Project for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Arnemancy.